Hello there everyone, my name is Rosemonkey and welcome to 8 characters from Harry Potter that weren't in the films, but I think they should have been. For those of you who haven't seen the films or read the books and want to get round to that, spoiler alert. Although if you haven't, where have you been? Although I can't really talk because it's only recently that I've actually watched all of the films and read the last of the books as well. So, yeah, I'm just as bad. So the first character I really missed in the films was Ludo Bagman. He's like the sport minister in the Ministry, and the reason why I think it was important that he be at least a little bit mentioned, first of all, he's the one that gives the Weasleys the tickets for the Quidditch World Cup. He is the announcer at the Quidditch World Cup. He's the one that does the whole commentary thing. And he also ends up in debt to Fred and George Weasley. The reason this happens is because the leprechauns that the Irish brought with them throw a load of fake gold into the crowd, and that fake gold is what Ludo uses to pay Fred and George because they make a wager with him and they win. So he gives them gold that later disappears, and they spend the entire book chasing after him, trying to get their money back. At the same time as goblins chasing after him because he owes them a lot of money, and I think he disappears because of Death Eaters as well. You kind of vaguely see that I think he's interrogated to do with Death Eaters. I think he was maybe an informant to do with Death Eaters at some point, but I don't think he was a Death Eater himself, from what I remember. But still, he's mixed in the wrong crowd, and he just spends the entire time running away from people, and which I think would have been really funny to show. But at the same time, I think that whole conflict between him and the Weasley twins led to the point where Harry, when he wins the Triwizard Cup, gives his Triwizard winnings to Fred and George, which is like I think 1,000 galleons, and he gives them to Fred and George and says, here's your money that you need, go and do your joke shop. And they do. But that entire interaction is missed out of the films, and I think that if Ludo Bagman was in, and they showed a bit more of that, then that would have made more sense. Next, Charlie Weasley. I think he's in the Egypt picture, when the whole Weasley family goes to Egypt. Apart from that, I don't think he's in the entire film series. Charlie is the brother that works in Romania with the dragons. The first time that we get some kind of wind of him is when his friends take Norbert in the Philosopher's Stones, the first film. We don't actually meet Charlie properly until the Goblet of Fire, because in the Goblet of Fire, one of the Triwizard, well, the first Triwizard challenge is to get past dragons, and Charlie is one of the ones that works with them. So he's in the Forbidden Forest. When Hagrid introduces Harry to the dragons, he talks to Charlie Weasley, and we don't get to see him. He's probably also at Bill and Fleur's wedding in the Deathly Hallows, and he's probably also at Hogwarts when, you know, all the big fight in Deathly Hallows Part 2. He probably should be in there somewhere, but we don't see any sign of him. And I just think that's a proper shame, because he's like the only Weasley brother that doesn't even get barely a mention. Percy barely gets a mention either, let's be honest, but he's at least seen a bit more. But don't get me started on Percy, that's a whole other video. Next, I want to talk to you about Teddy Lupin. He is Tonks and Remus's son. And in the films, I don't even think he's mentioned by name, which is ridiculous. Sirius dies at the end of the Order of Phoenix, and in the Half-Blood Prince, we see Tonks being quite stressed and quite depressed, and her Patronus changes to the form of a dog. And Harry and friends kind of mistakenly believe it's because she's upset about Sirius, because he was her cousin. But that isn't the reason. What they don't find out until later is that Tonks has been in love with Lupin for like the longest time, and he just keeps buffing her off because, well, he's a werewolf and he doesn't want to bring danger and hassle into her life. But she's an aura, she kind of asks for it, let's be honest. By the time we reach the Deathly Hallows, they've, I think, convinced each other, they're in love, they get married, and Tonks ends up pregnant. And she has a little boy. And I think this entire relationship between the two of them is really played down. And it's such a shame, because they're such a cute couple. And on top of that, they both die. So you've got this orphaned character who isn't even mentioned by name and barely gets noticed at all. And another big reason why he at least should be mentioned a little bit, Harry is Teddy's godfather. It's never mentioned. It just doesn't happen. And that's huge. That's a huge thing to miss out. So yeah, I think personally that in order to really pay homage to Tonks and Lupin's sacrifice, they should have at least shown a little bit of Teddy, or mentioned his actual name, and not just completely ignored his presence. Speaking about children who are growing up without their parents, what about Frank and Alice Longbottom? They are my joint 4th and 5th characters that were left out, and I think that's quite sad. I think the fact that they're not shown really downplays the tragedy that is Neville. In the Order of Phoenix, after Harry sees Mr. Weasley being injured, Mr. Weasley ends up at St. Mungo's, and Harry and all the Weasleys go to visit him at St. Mungo's. While they're there, Harry and I think Ron and Hermione kind of wander off on their own and end up bumping into Gilderoy Lockhart. You remember him? The blonde memory charm guy from Chamber of Secrets who's now lost his marbles because the memory charm went completely wrong. Well, he's a permanent resident of St. Mungo's, and when they kind of end up being roped into following him back into his ward, they see Frank and Alice Longbottom. And, well, I don't think they see Frank, but they see Alice, because they see Neville walk past, and then Alice walks up with a little sweet wrapper, and she gives it to Neville. And Neville's grand's just like, oh, just throw it away. But Neville doesn't. He keeps it and puts it in his pocket. And I just think that's such a tragic, beautiful, heart-wrenching moment that just should have been shown, because it would have completely explained a lot of Neville's backstory. And I think it would have also given some weight to the heartache that Dark Lord caused, that Voldemort caused when he was in power. It kind of shows what very real things happened to families, and the fact that families can be ripped apart even without them dying. And I just think that should have been put in. I mean, come on guys. That just, why? And again, speaking of tragic characters, Merope Gaunt. She is Voldemort's mother, and we meet her, I believe, in the Half-Blooded Prince. Dumbledore is showing all these memories to Harry, and one of them is this memory of a very young Merope Gaunt being abused by her family. They downtrod her. She's practically... They accuse her of being a squib because she's so traumatised. She can barely do magic. She can't do anything. But she falls in love with a muggle man, Tom Riddle, and she enchants him, makes him run away with her, and they eventually end up with a son. But she loves him too much to keep bewitching him, so eventually she stops doing it, and he returns home because he's just like, who are you and why am I here? Leaving her pregnant and alone and very unwell because of all the stress that she's been through. So she ends up at an orphanage, she gives birth, she dies, and Tom Riddle is left as an orphan, unwanted by his father, you know, via death, technically abandoned by his mother. But that's such, again, a heart-wrenching situation. And it's not as if she didn't love her son, but she'd just been through too much to survive. And I just think that, again, should have been included. Time for a more light-hearted character now. Peeves the Poltergeist. Why? Why did they not put that in? Why? Peeves is a ghost that can hurl furniture around. He can traumatise students and teachers, and he does. He chases them everywhere, he hurls abuse at them, he throws things at them. What amazing comic relief, and they don't put that in. One of my favourite moments has to be when Fred and George leave, and I think Peeves salutes them, and they tell Peeves to keep harassing Umbridge, and he does. He does as they ask, because even Peeves loved Fred and George. Everybody loves Fred and George, no matter how ridiculous they are and how much trouble they cause. Everybody loves them, you can't help it. And I just love the fact that Peeves does as they ask. Don't get me wrong, there are other ghosts that were left out as well. You barely get to see the bloody Baron. You don't get to see Professor Binns, the teacher that just died lecturing one day and walked up, left his body and carried on teaching. But Peeves, I think, is the main casualty. He should have been included. And now we get to the one character that I think, no, she should not have been left out. She should have been included, and that is Winky, the house elf. Winky is owned by the Crouch family. She first appears, again, in The Goblet of Fire. I think that's the film where a lot of people just kind of got shoved to one side and left out, to be honest. But the reason why Winky, I think, should have been included is because she gives a lot of backstory to the Crouch situation. So first you have Senior Crouch, Barty Crouch, the minister who is basically putting all these people away, all of these Death Eaters in prison, and he suddenly finds out that his son is a Death Eater. Son being a Death Eater has to go to prison. You know, there's no way around it. But when Mr. Crouch's wife gets really unwell, she asks him to rescue Barty as like a last favour to her. So Mr. Crouch sneaks into Azkaban with his wife, swaps them over, and sneaks out with his son. And it's Winky who is put in charge of watching the boy. Don't get me wrong, that's not supposed to be difficult. He's under the Imperious Curse, so he doesn't wander, and he's invisible all the time, so nobody knows that he exists. But that's the whole point. Like, she's supposed to babysit him, she's supposed to watch him, and make sure that he's alright. So now we go to the Quidditch World Cup again, and Barty Crouch Jr. casts the Dark Mark. In the films, it doesn't explain how Barty Jr. got out of Azkaban, and nobody seems to care that he's broke out either. In the books, at least, it explains everybody thinks he's dead. And I think it kind of briefly says everybody thinks he's dead in the films, but it doesn't explain why he's not dead. It doesn't explain that it's Barty Sr. who breaks him out. It also doesn't explain that in order to stop Barty Sr. from blowing Junior's cover, he is put under the Imperious Curse by Voldemort and kept housebound, so that when he eventually dies, it's, well, obviously I think it's his son that kills him. They explain that, but they don't explain that he's trying to warn Dumbledore of what he's done, because I don't think in the films he actually did it. I think it kind of just glosses over it, and he doesn't know his son is out of Azkaban, but he's the reason that his son is out of Azkaban. But when that Dark Mark is cast in the Quidditch World Cup, it is Winky that is found holding Harry Potter's wand, and only Barty Sr. knows that his son should be there. So he goes over, he finds his son, still invisible, so nobody else sees him, and they bring Winky over, and Winky is released of her duties. She's fired, which then leads to a very distraught, drunk, crying house elf in Hogwarts kitchens, rocking backwards and forwards with a tea cosy on her head, just breaking her heart about how Barty Crouch Sr. won't be able to cope without her. Because how is he going to keep tabs on his son when he's working at the Ministry? He can't. And she has a point, because let's be honest, he's already broke out of the Imperious Curse once. He could probably do it again. But that entire struggle, the whole Barty Crouch breaking his son out of Azkaban and trying to keep him hidden and trying to do right by his wife, and all of that is just gone from the film. And I think if they included Winky, it would have been explained better. And I just wanted to see her in a little tea cosy hat. I think that would have been adorable. But no, apparently not. So those were the 8 characters that I think really should have been included in the films, especially Winky. I think that's the sorest complaint for me. She should have been in there. Thank you for watching though. If you guys have enjoyed this video, then give the like button some love, and let me know in the comments below what other kind of similar videos you would like to see. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye! I'm going to be able to work and earn my money, and everything is just going to be so much easier. I'm in such a good mood today, even before I heard about that. I've got so much stuff done today, I feel so productive. Just happy days, massive happy days.